Hi, everybody. Ian Bremmer here, and a quick take to kick off your week. The war in Iran is, of course, still going on. President Trump has announced the end of Operation Epic Fury, and the United States is not engaging in strikes against Iran, but that doesn't mean that the Strait of Hormuz is passable. It still remains shut. The Americans have a blockade. The Iranians continue to disrupt other ships from going through. And Project Freedom, ill-fated, short-lived, is, at least for now, suspended. So what does all of this mean? Well, there are still negotiations going on. And this time around, the Iranians have responded. President Trump had said weeks ago that Iran had 48 hours to open the strait or he was going to destroy them. Of course, they didn't open the strait, and he didn't respond militarily. And this time around, he has said that the Iranian responses are totally unacceptable, but I guess this is upside. He hasn't threatened to destroy them. And part of the reason for that is because he recognizes that he doesn't really have any good military options. And this raises big questions about where we are going, given that this blockade continues and the costs are big. The United States is drawing down its inventories of oil and refined oil as quickly as we've seen at any point since the 1970s. There are no more tankers coming in, and lots of export of oil from the U.S. to other countries around the world, because the U.S. produces a lot and because the prices are really high. But this means that shortages are coming soon. And there's very little that can be done when you have demand at these prices and you don't have adequate supply. And that means you're going to see shortages, you're going to see demand destruction in the United States within a matter of a few weeks. And that would be true even if the strait were open this week, which is not about to happen. So that is kind of where we are. And I guess the question is to what extent President Trump cares. You could put export controls on and prevent the Americans from exporting to other countries and keep that oil in the U.S., which would forestall some of those challenges. That is extremely unpopular in Congress and doesn't look likely to pass. You could certainly take gas taxes off, federal gas taxes off in the United States, and that would help a little bit in keeping prices from increasing much more quickly. But it is a short-term fix. It doesn't really resolve anything. This is in the context of a U.S. economy that is much more resilient than most other countries around the world, though less than the Chinese economy to this kind of a crisis, given the electrification, the EVs, and the fact that they have higher levels of energy stockpile than the rest of the world combined in terms of oil. I would say the Chinese are probably the most resilient in responding to this crisis, though from a lower base. This is all continuing to look really problematic going forward. Now, Trump has changed his goals, and you no longer hear President Trump talking about regime change in Iran. You no longer hear him talking about Iranian ballistic missiles or about support for proxies in the region. In the last 24 hours, there's been more talk about floating the idea that the Iranians don't need to give up all of their enriched uranium stocks, that some of it could stay in Iran because the Americans have the ability to monitor what is there and could engage in strikes, as could other countries if they tried to gain access to it. That has been a component of what the Iranians are demanding, which is the idea that some of this would stay in Iran and would be diluted to lower levels of enrichment with inspectors on the ground. But none of this is happening soon. And the reason it's not happening soon is because the Iranians believe that they are in a better position, that they have more leverage than the Americans. And I think part of the reason they believe that is because of the incoherence of the American president. It's the only way you can put it, that President Trump has been all over the map saying that the Iranians are about to capitulate, they're about to surrender unconditionally, or else they haven't. and they haven't for matters of weeks and weeks and weeks. And the American response has been essentially a climb down and patience and then impatience and an effort to get some ships through and send destroyers through and then taking those destroyers right out. So if you are the Iranians, you could be forgiven for believing that even though you're in a much weaker country with a lot of your leaders that have been killed and a lot of your military that's been blown up, your ability to continue to cause pain to the global economy and to the Americans gives you more leverage. Whether they are right or wrong, we will see, but they certainly believe that they're right. Now, then there's the question of, does Trump believe that he has more leverage? I think he has misplayed the American hand so far and misplayed it badly. But does President Trump really believe that? And the answer here, I fear, is no. And the reason it's no is because he is being fed a litany of how brilliant he is in a way that really very few of us has ever experienced in our lifetimes. He is surrounded by people that really desperately want access and continued access to him. They are competing with other people that really desperately want access to him. And they know that Trump really prefers good news. And so even when they're delivering not so great news, they couch it in how brilliant he is, how successful almost everything is going, except for maybe this one little thing that could he tweak a little bit. And that's how you get Project Freedom. And that's how you get a decision to attack the Iranians without a plan for what happens if they actually don't immediately fold and suspend tanker traffic, disrupt it through the strait. That's where we are, is that the decision-making process has been incredibly poorly informed. We have had many, many presidents historically that don't know much about foreign policy, that aren't trained, don't have the expertise. Almost all of those presidents get advice and listen to the advice from people around them that have far more capacity than the president does. There are people around Trump that have that capacity, there's no question. Marco Rubio, I certainly put in that category, and many others on the economic side, Scott Bessent and Jerome Powell. I mean, Trump has access to some of the most capable and also not just most capable people, but also some of the best intelligence in the world. And yet he's making really bad decisions. And the reason is because he doesn't necessarily want to digest that. And therefore, the information is not being presented to him in a fully transparent way. I think that's a huge problem. And I also worry that the upcoming U.S. China summit is likely to go less well than it should, because Trump is actually in a weaker position. And when Xi Jinping really shows his extraordinary respect for the American president, and all of these CEOs are going and they have a great military parade and displays that honor the most extraordinary American president that the Chinese have ever seen, and Trump is impressed by that and appreciates this and sees Xi Jinping as closer to a peer than any other world leader, and therefore is more prepared to work with him constructively than he would with allies that should be far more trusted by the United States, but aren't necessarily by President Trump. That if Xi Jinping says, I want X, Y, and Z from you on Taiwan, for example, and on semiconductors, for example, or else I'm not providing you anything you want, that Trump is more likely to provide that deal, is more willing to say yes to things that no other American president would. We'll see where that goes very shortly. But I do know that Trump advisors are concerned about this, concerned that when Trump is one-on-one alone with Xi, or just with the families, with the wives and with the translators, that they don't know what he'll say. They don't know how he will react to a President Xi that portrays Trump as the greatest deal maker ever. And look, there are other leaders that have done that. When Prime Minister Netanyahu from Israel goes out and says, you deserve the Nobel Peace Prize, sir, and we are recommending you for this. I mean, Trump at one level understands that he's being played by a guy that operates very similar to President Trump does, very transactionally. On the other hand, he likes it. And he gives more time to that. And he's more willing, perhaps, to listen to and respond to that than he would be with leaders that aren't prepared to kiss up in that way. And I think that it would be dereliction of duty for the chairman of the Chinese Communist Party not to give that a shot, because he's very unlikely to have a shot like that with any other president in the future, and he's going to still be there, and Trump, of course, is not. So the window is narrow. They will see each other several times in the coming year, so it doesn't all have to get done this week, but this is a very consequential meeting, and it's a consequential meeting because Trump's advisors don't actually know what he's going to do. Linked to Iran, yes, Trump needs something from China there. He wants the Chinese to use their leverage on Iran to try to bring this war to a close. Very interesting that the Chinese summoned the Iranian foreign minister to come and visit with their leadership just in the last week. What they had to say and what they're willing to do, again, we will find out very, very shortly. Interesting week for geopolitics, to be sure. Sometimes be careful about the interesting that you wish for. That's it for me. I will talk to you all real soon.